This is Conversations with Marsha, sponsored by the Great Connections, an educational institution specializing in innovative and transformative programs for young adults. We help them build a life of achievement and adventure. Please visit our website at thegreatconnections.org. I'm Marsha Familaro-Enright, Program Director of the Great Connections. And in Conversations with Marsha, we discuss a variety of issues related to optimal education with a wide number of guests. Please hit the bell and subscribe. Today, we're lucky to have Nick Capaldi to interview. Nick is the Emeritus Legendre-Soulé Distinguished Chair in Business Ethics at Loyola University in New Orleans, where he also served as Director of the Center for Spiritual Capital. He received his BA from the University of Pennsylvania and his Ph.D. from Columbia. He's taught at Queens College, CUNY, National University of Singapore, West Point, and the University of Tulsa. And he was a fellow at Hoover Institute. He's authored 12 books, over 100 articles, 10 anthologies, and more. We'll have all his details in the program notes. His principal research and teaching interest is in public policy and its intersection with political science, philosophy, law, religion, and economics. Now in retirement, he has started a project called The Invisible College, and we wanted to hear more about it today. I'm very privileged to know Nick. I met him years ago at a Liberty Fund conference, and then he was involved in a Liberty Fund conference that I ran on Montessori education. And I just find him a very delightful person, so I'm really looking forward to this interview. So Nick, tell us, what is the Invisible College and why did you start it?
Good question. I went into what I describe as early retirement. And what I mean by that is I had decided that I needed a new challenge in my life. And my wife, in a sense, was very much in the same position. We were not leaving something because we had to or to get away. We just thought it was time to do something different. And the thing that occurred to me is that one of the reasons I wanted to move on is that higher education in the US had become a total disaster. And it was a reflection of some of the things going on in the culture. So the question I ask, when I put on my big think pretentious cap, I say, what can I do to save the world? And the answer I come up with is somehow or other, I have to change public discourse, the way people think and talk, the vocabulary they use, the framework in terms of which public policy issues are discussed. Now, I'm not in a position to do that in a serious way. I don't have a following on TikTok, nor do I have a TV show. So I wanted to start small. And the thing that I most enjoy doing, and people seem to think that I helped others to enjoy it as well, was to conduct discussions or conversations on important books, either the great books or books that were topical. And it occurred to me that there were a large number of other people who would be interested in doing this, not just retired or semi-retired professors. And in the course of my own professional activity, I'd met a large number of lay people, business people, professionals, et cetera, who wanted to be more engaged with intellectual matters, but of course never get around to it because all of us are so busy with our careers and family responsibility, and that just taking the time to read is difficult enough. And on top of that, discussing with other people, for more than 5 minutes at a cocktail party. But when presented with an opportunity to do this formally, as I was able to do under the Liberty Fund umbrella, they really seem to love it and get a lot out of it. So I thought maybe this is what I should do. So I'm doing it on 2 levels. One is I conduct these conversations myself. It's very easily done. Most people, in fact, the first one I did, somebody said, well, how much do I have to pay? And when I explained to him how inexpensive Zoom was, I said, this is costing me next to nothing to organize this event. And so I do that specifically on topics that are of interest to me. But the other thing that I'm beginning to do and getting some positive feedback on this is I can literally train other people to do this, or to encourage them to set up their own little community. You can do this in two ways. I mean, obviously now we are all using Zoom. It's convenient, especially if you want to get people from different parts of the country or even different parts of the world together. And COVID, of course, has made it necessary for a long time for people to communicate this way. But at the same time, when COVID is disappearing, we have in our own home set up our dining room. In fact, our dining table, special dining table, is coming today, or almost as we speak, to literally have meetings in our own house. And we have neighbors and others because of the community in which we have chosen to live in Greenville, South Carolina. There's a remarkable community for the number of professional people that it has. It's growing like crazy. So we're going to be meeting in our house as well as doing this by Zoom. But so in a sense, there are two dimensions, or perhaps three. I do this personally because it's rewarding for me, and I enjoy the give and take with my neighbors and worldwide network of friends. Secondly, I'm hoping that other people will do this as well, to share the fun and to create what I hope will be, at the very least, a national network. So long term, I hope that the Invisible College will serve as a clearinghouse. So if you are interested in doing this, you would contact me. I can train you how to do this. It's not very difficult. Or if you are already sort of have the hang of it, I can put you in touch with people. I can say, well, what sort of people do you want to know? I know hundreds of people. I have a whole Rolodex, so to speak. I can recommend people on this topic or that topic.
Well, that's great as a networker. That's
right.
Yeah.
And so you say, so why would I do this? Not because I want to monetize it. I'm going to be very careful. In my case, I think money is extremely important, but so I don't want to sound like I'm an idiot. But in my case, I don't want to be corrupted by the idea of monetizing it. I want to keep it as pure as possible, because my ultimate objective, this is to get back to my claim about changing the world. I honestly believe that if hundreds of people did this sort of thing and raised the level of discussion, two things would happen. One, it would be impossible for people to settle for the silly level at which public policy is discussed in the United States. We have to get beyond journalists and what they know or don't know, or what their particular agenda is. So I want to raise the level from that point of view. And I think also long term, it might change the kind of politics that we have. If there were more people who understood what it means to discuss public policy, they would stop overrating professional politicians and realize that this is something that far more people are capable of doing. And maybe instead of an establishment class of professional politicians whose motivation after a while is completely corrupted, we would get people who would understand that, well, I always think of government as a necessary evil. All right, if it's a necessary evil, then all of us will take our turns performing this role, have no illusions about the fact that somehow we're the only people capable of doing this. And no one would think that you should do this without consulting your neighbors, without saying, what do people really think about these issues? And perhaps if I think they're misguided, how can I persuade them? So I really think that both the culture as a whole and the political class will be changed, because more people, I think, will get involved in public policy disputes, and maybe at some point want to take their turn. But it should be a turn. It should be something you do. So I want to create the impression that that public service is a service, is something you do for a short period of time, and then you go back to
you want to cultivate statesmen.
Yes. Right.
Instead of politicians.
Not politicians, right? And that the important people in the world are the people who bake your bread, who deliver your newspaper, who come up with a new way, a time-saving device. who play third base for the Chicago White Sox or whatever. These are real people doing important stuff, right? They're the ones that change the world. They're the ones that create wealth. They're the people who get us to see things differently. And we should stop thinking of politicians as leaders and as people who facilitate what the rest of us should be doing. But I think we've lost that that perspective. I mean, public servants should be thought of as servants, not as people directing our lives.
Right.
That's what I hope will eventually happen. In the meantime, that's not incompatible having a lot of fun arguing with people about what passage means, etc.
It's reminding me very much of what happened after World War II when Mortimer Adler came out with his book, How to Read a Book.
Yes.
And people all over the country organized these discussion groups where they were reading the great books and discussing really deep issues. And I sometimes wonder, have you ever lately seen the show, What's My Line? They have it on TV sometimes.
No.
Show, What's My Line? Where you've got journalists, you've got actors, you've got all kinds of people like that on a panel, and they're questioning somebody to try to figure out what their line of business is. And it will blow you away to watch this because of what the actors know. The actors were so knowledgeable at that time that it just it's like a different universe than the way we have our actors now. And so you sit there and you watch that and you wonder, okay, what kind of education did those actors have, or what was the cultural surround that made them so knowledgeable?
That's interesting. Now, the other reason I find it interesting is I have a good friend who goes out of his way to look up the journalists that we see on TV most of the time. Only to discover that many of these people have not only did they go to a third-rate university, many of them never even finished their degree, yet they're demanding $10 to $15 million salaries a year, talking about things they couldn't possibly begin to understand, have no context, no framework into which to. But there's been very obviously a serious change in the context of any kind of serious.
Well, and even the ones that have gone to the so-called best universities, they're getting a philosophy of journalism that's not about reporting the facts, but injecting their political opinions into and all ideology into the writing. I've seen a tremendous change in the writing in the Chicago Tribune since recently, because it got taken over, and some of the old reporters like John Cass, who never went to university but is fantastic about reporting the facts, were ousted from. Well, they were given a buyout, but they were trying to oust him before that, And now you read the articles, and they're injected with ideology.
It's horrible. What's happened to higher education since the 1960s? It's been completely undermined. I don't know if you're familiar with some of the literature, recent literature on this, but the SDS, literally in the 1960s,
Students for a Democratic Society.
Right. Yeah. Took the position that the only way they could capture the institutions is not by revolution, but from within. And the institution they most aimed at was higher education. And then, due to a whole series of accidents, including the Vietnam War, et cetera, the vast expansion of American higher education, the left completely took over the university. So it's nothing like what we may have remembered, or what older people may have recalled when they were undergraduate. It's the world has changed, and not for the better. That's another reason. For example, again, when I meet older people, they want to know what's going on at the university. I tell them, they're appalled, and I give them examples. And I say, look, if you want to have a serious discussion about an issue, it can't be done on a university campus. We're going to have to move the cultural center outside, or at least temporarily. Now, long term, I think we want to recapture the universities, or certainly have an alternative to what's on offer now, which is one of the reasons I'm very much interested in and behind what you're doing.
does our new project of opening a new college called Reliance College. Yes, we're
Mhm.
just starting to publicize that. Yeah, and I totally agree with you. I think we have to have a parallel university system, at least until things can be changed in the current one. I mean, I just gave a talk about this last week, that exactly what you were saying, that the postmodernists through the universities, and SDS was at Berkeley, where Marcuse was teaching them to be
Right,
intolerant to tolerance.
right,
You know,
exactly.
he wrote that article, Repressive Tolerance. The tolerance was intolerant. So
Yeah,
anyway, um, and one of the things that I was saying was that they got control of the universities because of student loans. This is one of the ways that they got control. And the other way was through, it started with the GI Bill, because there was corruption with the use of the funds in the GI Bill. And so that's how the federal government got involved in accrediting and overseeing the universities.
right.
And then that just expanded more and more, and the left got themselves injected into it. Yeah.
Yeah, the vast it went from before the Second World War, 2% of high school graduates went to the university. And then it expanded to the point now where it's 60 to 70%. And they had to staff this very quickly. And I would add that there was a serious deterioration in the quality of the PhDs being turned out. In fact, I remember at one point refusing to serve on certain PhD committees because I saw them giving out degrees to people who really didn't know what they were talking about. And I said, you know, I'm just not going to want to be part of what I think is an entirely corrupt program. So you had a lot of people who were doing this, and the expansion came so quickly. The next thing we knew, the ideologues had literally taken over the university. It's been very, very sad to watch this. Let me also argue that the kind of thing I want to do with the Invisible College is to get everybody to accept that while the university may be the most important institution, we can't just have the culture being defined by one institution. Want other places in the culture where people talk about the important ideas. And so I want to aim for that other sector, which is outside the university. At the same time, I want to see a kind of symbiotic relationship. If enough people get involved in my program, presumably that will influence where they send their kids to college, to whom they donate their money when they're in a position to be charitable or philanthropic. So I think it's at least a two-pronged sort of attack. Reform the educational system by providing an alternative, which is just exactly what you're doing. And then I hope what I'm doing is servicing that indirectly, but also creating another cultural context where the important ideas get discussed.
And you're well, something like that is happening with these podcasts, which is great, because you're having all these long form discussions. You know, it's funny that on the one hand, the pundits claim that nobody has any attention, so they all want everything fast. But then on the other hand, the long form discussions in the podcasts have become very, very popular. So people obviously do want long form discussions.
Tell
us a little bit about how you run the discussion. And first tell us about Liberty Fund a little bit, and then because you said it was similar to what Liberty Fund did.
Right, exactly. It's the inspiration for what I'm doing. If I try to describe Liberty Fund, nobody would possibly believe that such an institution existed, at least in its previous incarnation, where one person, Pierre Goodrich, who's a very, very influential philanthropist and also a serious autodidact and intellectual in a way, gave his personal fortune. And we would gather usually at a resort or a very nice hotel, small group of people, usually somewhere between 15 and 20. We would have read the material in advance, and we would spend the weekend conversing about this as a community. And it was very carefully set up over, I would say, a 2.5-day period. We had an opening dinner where we got to meet the new people and to re-meet old friends. And so a kind of nice community was formed. The discussions were always very polite. We did not have to agree. We only had to, just say what we had to say and learn from others and share our views. No consensus was not the object of this, but I think all of us came away with a much deeper understanding of things than we would have had. The appreciation of how different people's experience can enlighten a work, or it's sort of like seeing something for the first time through the eyes of other people. So as I said to people, I learn when I read on my own. I learn when I write something. I learn when I teach. But there was something special about learning through a discussion with other people. I mean, sometimes I would realize that somebody gave me a whole new perspective.
Mhm.
It would never have occurred to me, if I'm just reading on my own in a
Exactly.
room, totally isolated from the rest of the world.
Mhm.
And then sometimes, even if my mind wasn't changed, I left with a better understanding of my own position because I had, in a sense, been required to articulate it for the benefit of
Mhm.
of others, and I would get such a high from this. Now, it just isn't enough time or money for any one organization to do this. And of course, the problem with any organization after a while, especially an organization that has money, is that it gets to have internal problems of its own. There are people who want to use it for their own purposes, etc. So that's another reason I'm hoping to create a structure that
Mhm.
can sustain itself without people asking the question, how are we going to monetize it?
Mhm.
I'm in a
Well,
position where I don't have to worry.
yeah, right. Well, it sounds like what you're organizing is you're trying to encourage self-organized groups
Yes,
that are
yes,
interested for personal reasons in exploring these ideas, you know?
absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Because I want to be able to multiply myself, or to multiply what I'm doing. It's such fun for me, and I see this in other people as well who participate. And you can usually identify. I mean, you've been to these, so there are people who were there. Every once in a while, you get people who just want to sound off, and they're still in their own little silo. And then there are people who are there because they're advancing their careers, and so they
Mhm.
think of it that way. That's understandable, especially if you're a young person and you're just sort of getting started and you want people to know who you are and make
Mhm.
the right kind. And then there's some people who would go just because they were paid to be in a resort
Mhm.
for a weekend. I mean, that's kind of a minority, but still there were people like that.
Yeah.
Then there are other people for whom this became an end in itself.
Mhm.
Like it was the high.
Mhm.
Like, when can I get another chance to
Yeah.
do this? There's no way that even a very generous foundation like Liberty Fund could possibly do this, even for the people they like, because they were trying to expand their own network. But there's absolutely no reason why we can't do this
Mhm.
on our own and find like-minded people who are willing to grow this activity. So
Yeah.
that's
Well,
what I
it grew all over the United States after the Adler book. I mean, there
yes.
were there were groups all over the place after
Yeah. In
the
fact,
Adler.
that was one of the inspirations
Yeah.
for Mr. Goodrich himself. He saw the advantage of it. One of his hesitation, I shouldn't say one of, a good way of putting it, one of his regrets is that we didn't get enough non-academics involved
Mhm.
in these discussions. And by that, I mean people who teach full time, because it's easy for people who teach full time to get together. And then you kind of like talk shop at a high level. And that's
Well,
not what he had in mind. Ideas
yeah.
have consequences. It's supposed to transform the way people think about the world, transform even the way you understand
Mhm.
yourself. And
Well, because
so,
you have to have people in all professions understanding this
yes,
make a difference,
exactly,
right? Not just the
exactly.
academics.
And I was able to do this on a very modest scale
Mhm.
when I ran my institute at Loyola University. I found large numbers of people in the business community who wanted to be involved in these
Mhm.
discussions. And there were several members of the Liberty Fund board who are themselves accomplished professionals, but not academics. And good conversation is something that you don't have to be a professional academic to do this. You can learn a few things about how to encourage discussion,
Mhm.
how to monitor it, how to benefit from it. That's very easy. It's a lot easier to convey than most people realize. I'll also suggest something else, because I think you would agree with this, and you will probably see this in the Reliance College when you get going. Um, Corporations at one point would pay a lot of money to bring in outsiders to help them with finding out who the good executives are. There's our sort of rough rule of thumb that all of the people who are in supervisory positions in the business world, all of the studies that have ever been done show that in 3/4 of the cases, people hate their supervisors.
Mhm.
Think, well, was that a kind of natural thing? No, I don't think it's natural. Part of the reason is that people who are in supervisory positions very often don't know how to supervise.
Yes. Yeah.
So the companies would spend a fortune, bringing in somebody who would get out the whiteboard. I mean, the whole
Yeah.
routine. And usually people trained in psychology, et cetera. And I had one instance where a company allowed me to do this, and they were very, very pleased. But I've not been successful in getting other companies to follow it. And they said, "Well, what are you going to do?" And I said, "It's all very simple. We're going to have a Liberty Fund type discussion."
Mhm.
Said, "Oh, come on, you got to be kidding!
Yeah.
How would that enable us to identify the people with leadership potential?" And I
Mhm.
said, "That's simple. You listen to how they contribute to the meeting. Are they just there to hear themselves, or do they pick up on what other people
Yeah.
say? Do they try to bring this material together, formulate it in such a way that it's inclusive, that it focuses on where we should be going next in our discussion?" I think this is actually a kind of natural event, and there's some people who are just terrific at this.
Mhm.
So in a sense, I am not turning them into leaders. I am discovering who are the people
Yes.
who already have a natural penchant for this. You can see this in students, in seminars when you're allowed to hold a real seminar. And I would imagine that in Reliance, you're going to come across a lot of people
Mhm.
who have that knack.
Well, it's very interesting. I've run this program in the summer, the Great Connections, for 12 years. And we use this dialogue style discussion where you're really encouraging conversation, not
Mhm.
debate, and not
Yes,
lecturing.
right,
Um,
right.
and it's interesting how many of my students later have told me how valuable that skill, they learned the skill of how to listen to other people and how to follow up on what the other person was saying. So they're actually having an interactive conversation. And they've
Yes,
told me that it's been so useful in their careers later.
good for
I've,
them.
I've had that, I've had spontaneously a number of students, tell me what's happened. One said that at his Ph.D., I'm sorry, the final evaluation,
Yeah, your defense or your dissertation.
the defense, right? That the professors told him it was the best defense they've ever seen.
Oh, good.
And they
Good.
thought it was because of the way he was able to respond to what they had to say. I mean, he wrote me this letter spontaneously about
That's fantastic.
yeah.
That's fantastic.
And I know this woman who's working as a head of a business organization, like a Chamber of Commerce in Columbia. And
Mhm.
she was saying how useful that whole dialogue, ability to listen and have a dialogue with people, has been in the business community. She's very
Yes.
successful in that. So,
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Very, very much so.
and
For about a period of a decade, Tim Fuller and I used to do this with graduate students. The Liberty Fund will allow us to run a whole week-long seminar.
mm,
And to this day, you're talking about getting feedback. To this day, some of these people are now out there in the world teaching, saying they remember that experience, a formative experience in their life, and that this was not something they were getting at their own universities, where they're usually lectured at
yes,
rather than being part of the
yes,
discussion. They also realized, let me connect something here, because I think this feeds into a concern that you and I have about getting people to understand the importance of the individual. And I sort of learned this from a lot from reading Oakeshott. And people would ask him, well, what do you do in a world in which there are all these different points of view that will emerge in a conversation? Is your role to get everybody to see it your way? And the answer is no. Okay, what I will show you how I put the material together and how it makes sense to me, and then I'm going to listen to you as you do it for yourself. What I'm doing in the process is helping you find your own voice.
Mhm.
Right? I am not asking you to be an echo of my voice. We'll say, well, why is that? Why would that be important to me? Wouldn't the normal human view be, I want everybody to just be an echo of myself? No, what I want is to live in a world in which people value their own individuality.
Mhm.
And if I get you to see how important your voice is to yourself, you will come to the conclusion, okay, even if there are all these differences of opinion, how do you live in a world in which there are all these different points of view? The answer is you create a society that values what the individual does and doesn't try to impose a view.
Mhm.
So I am, in a sense, indirectly getting you to see the value of a free society.
Mhm.
Not
Mhm.
not by giving you some argument for the free society, but eliciting from you, oh my God, I want to have my own perspective. And I'm
Exactly.
curious about others. So the best world is a world in which we all have the freedom to do this.
Mhm.
And that's the way in which, through osmosis, they get to learn that a free society is really the only way to live. And you can do that without sort of, hitting them over the head and saying, you've got to believe what I believe.
Exactly. No, they get it by the experience. The experience that what they have to say is something valuable, and other people are willing. They learn how to say something valuable, and other people are willing to interact with them about it, and that and strengthens their own self-confidence
Yes.
and their sense of autonomy.
Yes.
And people like that, they don't want to be ruled.
That's for sure. That's the whole thing.
You know?
And I have said this, and I'm sure you have too, on occasion in class. I've said to a student, you've just said it better than I could. And I mean it. I mean, I'm not being patronizing when I say that. In fact, I take it. Or sometimes I will tell them, students are a necessary evil, because I'm only going to understand this stuff by talking to other people about it. So in the end, it is the interaction between us that is important, not, and we're all sort of playing a role,
Mhm.
but it's a role. It's not that wisdom is housed in one person and somehow conveyed to others. So the wisdom is in the interactive process that we're all involved in. Not it's nobody has a property right in this.
Exactly.
It's a free good that can be shared.
Exactly. How did you get into teaching?
Good question. My parents were immigrants, and they had typical immigrant view of the world. Namely, this was to my good fortune, that social mobility depended on education. And they thought the best education for me was that I should become a doctor, because that way I would be performing good public service, I would make lots of money, and I would have status. So what could be better than to produce a child that can get all of that at once? And being good at schoolwork and not having any particular direction, schoolwork came easily to me. So I go to the university, and I have to take required courses. And one day, my advisor is helping me choose. And I used to do this in the old days, one from column A and one from column B, sort of like you have all these requirements that looks like a Chinese menu. And this was also before we had computers. So once you decided what you wanted to take, you had to go around to individual departments and sign up. So I went to sign up for a sociology course, and they were full. So I go back to my advisor, and I say, what am I going to do now? He said, well, take a course in philosophy. And I said, well, what is philosophy? And he said, we can find out if you take the course. Okay. I need to fulfill a requirement.
Yeah.
And it wasn't central to my plan. And I had a very, very good instructor. And one of the things we were required to do at one point in the course we were to make a 15-minute presentation to the rest of the class. We were responsible to explain to them what we understood by a particular reading. In my case, it was something from Francis Bacon. And so I did this, and I realized while I was delivering this lecture to the rest of the class and then fielding questions, all of a sudden it pops into my head. I said, this is the greatest fun in the whole world. This is how I want to spend the rest of my life. How in the world am I going to explain to my parents?
Oh, yeah.
I want to become a medical doctor.
Yeah.
So I literally fell in love with it simply because I was lucky. It was really luck to have the right kind of professor for me at the right moment in my career. That instead of doing worldly things is very important, but I decided that this was what I wanted to do, and it's the fun that I have doing. That's one thing that I miss in retirement, so to speak, is not having the contact with students on a regular basis. I mean, I still obviously speak to students, former students, etc. We keep in touch and we communicate, but I miss that classroom interaction that I used to have.
Well, and you point out something that, so often my plan for Reliance College is going to be in person. And so often I get this question, well, why don't you do it online? And I'm trying to create something that is optimal for young people, for their development. And they need that in-person interaction. There's things that happen in person that it just can't happen if you're just contacting each other online.
I agree completely.
Yeah.
I agree completely. I mean, I would say that an awful lot of our education can be conveyed through technological means.
Sure.
No question about that. No reason not to use it. But the most important thing that occurs in person. All these subtle ways we communicate, and not just by the words. I mean, I even, for example, it's easier for me to conduct a discussion, a Liberty Fund type discussion, in person because I can call on people because of cues they give me by their body language.
Yes, right.
All I'm seeing is your talking head. I'm not missing all that body language that goes with it. There's also a kind of enthusiasm and personal dimension that's just missing. So I agree. There's a human interactive dimension that is absolutely necessary.
Well, especially for young people. Because they're developing, they're trying to find out what they want to do in life. They're looking for inspiration. They're looking for a path to go, and the in-person is very, very important for that.
I think the best education is going to come about that way. And if you're not getting it right, so you need the in-person thing, but then of course you also need the right kind of people for the particular student body that you're putting together. If you pull that off, that would be fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
So, thank you. So I don't want to keep you too long, but I want to find out for people who might be interested in knowing more about Invisible College. Your idea is to develop this whole network of discussion groups, and you can help people network wherever they live with interesting people, and you can even probably recommend books to discuss.
Absolutely.
Or readings to discuss. I know one of the problems people have is they always think they're too busy to do this. So there's the other aspect of what are they going to get out of it? Why is this practically important to them? And we were talking earlier about what you, in talking to business people, what you were helping them understand. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, there's a sense in which nobody has ever explained to them the central role of entrepreneurship in our culture and in the particular way in which our world has developed. If I could just impose a little bit on the time constraint here, I have a kind of general view of where the market economy fits in with all of our other institutions, the fact that we live in a technological world. But if you understand what a market economy is, you also understand that it only flourishes in a certain context, political, legal, and cultural. And it's that cultural context which is absolutely essential. Something which I think, by the way, is missed by economists, but is picked up, for example, by people like Ayn Rand, all right? Why she's able to write through literature, okay? You're reading a piece of literature. You're not reading a dissertation on finance, okay? And something comes through about what your role is in this, and how important it is to have people do that. So I think that gets conveyed to the business community, that there's a crucial role here, and that you're an individual and you need the time to think this through. I mean, all the people, at least when I read biographies, autobiographies, and you ask important people in leadership positions, they will all say something like, I need to take out a certain amount of time each day or each week where I remind myself what's important. Where I go back and say, okay, this is the big picture. This is who I am. This is why I'm doing it. Because if you don't do that, you're going to drown in the details. You're going to drown in all the petty interactions that, that just consume a large part of our life. So taking the time to do this is not only intrinsically rewarding, but it's essential for you to be able to play your role in the best possible way. And this gets conveyed. I have friends who do, I don't know, I guess to describe this as not psychoanalysis, but therapy, right? And they one in particular does therapy for very wealthy business people who come to her and say, I don't know why I'm doing what I'm doing. All I'm doing is making money. And this, I have so much of it now that this is no longer satisfactory to me. So what do I do? And very often she will direct them to my kind of activity where they will find, oh, okay, now I'm getting a chance to remind myself of what's important and why my role in all of that.
What they're doing in their business, how that is important in life.
Yes.
How valuable it is.
It's a crucial part of the culture, right? It needs a certain cultural framework. It needs a certain legal framework. It needs a certain kind of political framework that where it maximizes the potential to do that. And we remind ourselves that these are the people who really make our civilization what it is. They're not pariahs, right? They're not here they're not primarily here to exploit us and to look down on these people just because they don't spend all of their time engaged in the kind of conversations that we like to engage in is an enormous error. We have a great deal to learn from them. So to me, the best conversations I have come with people who know more than I do about something. And all I feel I'm doing is sort of like a therapist, if you like. I'm helping them to articulate this.
Yes.
Right? Reminding themselves why they're doing
and why what they're doing is valuable.
And very, very valuable.
Yeah.
So I have enough competition. I don't want everybody to be like me. I just want to be useful to people who are doing all the stuff that I don't want to do or can do.
So we're going to put in the program notes how people can contact you.
Yes, that would be the best thing. In fact, just giving them my email address. And now we were all told, and it's good advice, you should only look at your email once or twice a day and respond to it that way. Otherwise, you waste a lot of time. Well, I'm afraid I'm one of those people who doesn't follow that advice. I look at my email 1,000 times a day. If I don't get a lot of emails, I feel that the world doesn't love me. So believe me, right? You are not imposing on me by sending emails, right? And I will answer right away. And I get very annoyed when people don't answer my emails within the same 24-hour period. Now, I would love to hear from others, and then of course we can arrange Zoom meetings or telephone meetings or whatever if they want to advance further in the process. And it's not an imposition on me. I hope people will realize I'm being sincere and serious about this.
Mhm.
This is really what I want to do. This is what I enjoy doing. And I can't wait to get other people to do this as well.
And do you have anything online kind of explaining Invisible College?
In fact, this very afternoon, meeting with my webmaster, we're going to be setting
Okay.
up our website, so it'll be easier for people to find us. Yeah, so that's we now have arrived at the point where I need a first-class website.
That's great.
To keep
Okay,
this
good.
going. Yes.
Do you know what the URL is going to be?
No, that's we're gonna
Okay.
look at that.
All right.
Turns out there are a lot of people, for good reason, who use the expression invisible college.
Mhm.
If you go online, you see there's lots of references to it.
Mhm.
And so we're going to have to find some way to
Okay.
distinguish ourselves from the other people who understandably want to take advantage of that expression.
All right. Well, so in the future, you can give me an update and I'll send it out to anybody who's interested on my
That
mailing
would be
list.
great.
Okay.
I really would appreciate that.
Sure.
You're very kind. Thank you.
Sure. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time and your very, very interesting and important project. And hope I see you soon.
You shall.